heart eye. The sanctuary of the outer reef, the air, is a heavy, invisible weight. It presses against your skin, smelling of crushed hibiscus and the sharp, metallic tang of salt drying on sun-bleached wood. You are not just observing this place, you are dissolving into it. Listen, beyond the immediate hiss of the tide, retreating over dead coral, a sound like thousands of tiny glass beads being placed onto a hard floor. There is a deeper frequency. It is a low-end throb that you feel in your solar plexus before you hear it with your ears. It is the pulse of the sea. 1,000 miles of open water distilled into a single rhythmic heartbeat. The first light is not yet yellow. It is a bruised, translucent violet that clings to the surface of the lagoon. You are standing on the edge of a forgotten atoll, a sliver of land so thin it feels like a mistake made by the cartographers of the 1940s. In your hand, you feel the grain of a heavy balsa wood board. It's cool to the touch, slightly damp from the morning mist. You run your palm along the rail. The texture is organic, uneven, unlike the sterile perfection of modern foam. This is a piece of a tree that once breathed in a forest, now shaped to breathe with the ocean. Every movement you make is slow, intentional. The slow cinema of the morning. There is no rush here. The swell has traveled for days to meet you. It can wait another few minutes. The crossing ends, you step into the shallows. The water is a shock, not of cold, but of absolute clarity. It wraps around your ankles, then your knees, a liquid silk that erases the boundary between your body and the sea. The soundscape shifts. The terrestrial world, the rustle of palm fronds, the distant call of a seabird begins to fade. Now, the dominant sound is the slap hiss of the water against the underside of the board as you begin to paddle. Slap, hiss, reach. Your breath synchronizes with the movement. The rhythmic friction of your chest against the wax on the board creates a soft, tactile rasp. To your left, the reef begins to drop away. The turquoise of the lagoon deepens into a terrifying, beautiful cobalt. This is the glass horizon. It is the point where the safety of the shore becomes a memory, and the raw physics of the planet take over. The architecture of the PQ are now half a mile out. The silence here is different. It is an expectant silence. Horizon line begins to distort. It doesn't just rise, it thickens. You see a dark, obsidian band stretching from north to south. It is the swell. It carries no white water, no foam, just pure kinetic energy. As it approaches the reef, the physics change. You hear the inhale. The water over the coral is sucked outward, making a gurgling, hollow sound as the reef is exposed for a fleeting second. Then, the exhale. Wave feels the floor. It slows down at the base, but the top continues at speed. It begins to lean. The sunlight catches the crest, turning the top 3 inches of water into a glowing neon emerald. This is the moment of communion, the deep resonance. You turn. You paddle. The board catches the glide. The sound changes instantly. The slapness becomes a roar, but not a chaotic one. It is a structured, architectural sound. It is the sound of a cathedral collapsing in slow motion. As you drop down the face, the wind whistles past your ears, a high-frequency contrast to the thunderous bass of the breaking lip behind you. For these these few seconds, the sonic history of surfing isn't about bands or records. It's about the original vibration, the friction of wood on water, the hiss of air being trapped in the curled butte, are riding a pulse of energy that started as a storm near the Aleutian Islands, and now it is ending its journey against the soles of your feet. The wave finishes. You kick out into the back of the swell. Silence returns, but it's a new kind of silence. Your ears are ringing with the frequency of the ocean. Your heart rate has slowed to match the interval of the sets. You sit on your board, bobbing in the deep water, watching the mist rise from the impact zone. The world is still. You are still. Archives of the wind. The sun has climbed higher now, turning the cobalt water into a blinding sheet of hammered silver. You retreat from the shoreline, walking back toward the makeshift camp nestled under the lean-to of twisted sea grape trees. Here, the air is cooler, smelling of damp canvas, old tobacco, and the sweet, fermented scent of fallen fruit. This is where the history is kept, not in a museum, but in a salt-encrusted trunk. Reach for a leather-bound journal. The cover is stiff, scarred by humidity and years of travel. As you open it, the spine groans, a dry, rhythmic crackle that sounds like footsteps on autumn leaves. This is the archive of the wind. Inside, the pages are translucent, yellowed at the edges like a nicotine stain, filled with the cramped, frantic handwriting of men who were trying to describe a feeling for which the English language had no words. The mechanical pulse. On the wooden crate beside the journal sits a 16 Bolex camera. It is a masterpiece of Swiss clockwork, a heavy, metallic heart that captured the first flickering ghosts of this odyssey. Listen to the ritual of the machine. You turn the winding key. Click, click, click. The tension builds in the spring, a tiny metallic resistance against your thumb. When you press the trigger, the sound is a rapid, percussive whir, a mechanical heartbeat running at 24 frames per second. It is the sound of time being sliced into thin ribbons of light. In the 1950s, this whir was the only bridge between the lonely reality of the reef and the rest of the world. Every second of film was precious. Every frame was a gamble. You weren't just filming a wave, you were capturing a miracle that would never happen the same way again. The map and the ghost unfold a maritime chart from 1948. The paper is heavy, see the notations made in graphite. Heavy swell from the NW. Reef exposed at low tide. Possible break here. These men were the wave seekers in the purest sense. They didn't have satellite imagery or GPS coordinates. They had the smell of the air, the behavior of the birds, and the whispers of the local fishermen. They were listening to the planet. To find these spots, you had to develop an ear for the long travel, the specific sound of a swell that had crossed 3,000 miles of open ocean. It sounds different than a local wind chop. It is deeper, more resonant, carrying the weight of its journey. The midday stasis. As the noon sun reaches its zenith, the world enters a state of high-definition stillness. The wind drops to a dead calm. The only sound is the occasional thump of a coconut hitting the sand, and the distant, hypnotic crush of the reef. You sit on a driftwood log, the wood smooth as bone from years of salt scrubbing. You are surrounded by the tools of the Odyssey. The heavy balsa board leaning against a tree, the ticking camera, the rustling maps. In this silence, you realize that the sonic history of surfing isn't just about the music that came later, the guitars and the drums. It began here, in the gap between the waves. It began in the patience of the seeker. It is the sound of waiting. The heat shimmer on the horizon makes the islands in the distance appear to float above the water. You close your eyes. The texture of the air against your eyelids is like a warm, wet cloth. You are not waiting for a wave anymore. You are becoming part of the frequency of the island itself. transition from day to night is not a slow fade, but a heavy, velvet curtain being drawn across the sky. The violet of the morning returns, but this time it is bruised with indigo and charcoal. As the visual world retreats, your hearing expands to fill the void. The reef, which was a rhythmic thud during the day, becomes a physical presence at night. In the dark, the sound of the breaking waves feels closer, more intimate, and significantly more dangerous. You can no longer see the white water, so your mind begins to map the architecture of the swell, based solely on the frequency of the impact. Boom. A long pause. Hiss. That is the sound of a set. Wave. The heavy, traveling energy that has finally reached its destination. The driftwood fire scratching is a sharp, dry scritch, followed by the soft whoosh of oxygen being consumed. The fire begins to feed on the salt-encrusted wood. Driftwood burns differently than forest wood. It carries a chemical history of the ocean. The flames flicker in strange, ghostly hues: lapis blue, emerald green, and a pale, ethereal orange. Listen to the fire. It doesn't just crackle. It pops as tiny pockets of trapped salt and moisture explode in the heat. It's a percussive, irregular rhythm that competes with the steady drone of the crickets in the jungle behind you. The scent is intoxicating, a mix of wood smoke, charred kelp, and the sweet, heavy perfume of the night-blooming jasmine that only opens when the stars appear. The ghost in the machine. You reach for the shortwave radio. It is a gray metal box, cold to the touch and slick with the evening's condensation. You turn the bakelite knob. Skrayly, the sound of the analog dial moving through the frequencies is a journey in itself. It is the sound of white space. You hear the whistles of atmospheric interference, the chirps of Morse code from distant cargo ships, and the eerie, oscillating hum of the ionosphere. This is the ghost frequency. In the 1950s, this was your only connection to the real world, a world that feels increasingly like a dream. You search for the weather report. You're looking for a specific kind of news. A storm in the North Pacific. A low-pressure system moving toward your coordinates. Suddenly, through the static, a voice emerges. It is thin, fragile, like a ghost speaking through a tin can. It's a broadcaster from Honolulu, nearly 2,000 miles away. The voice is reading ship coordinates and wind speeds. To anyone else, it would be boring data. To you, it is a prophecy. It is the music of the future swell, the solitude of the shore. You turn off the radio. The silence that follows is absolute, yet it is full. You lie back on the canvas cot, the fabric groaning slightly under your weight. Above you, the Milky Way is so bright it feels like a physical canopy, a dusting of crushed diamonds across a black floor. Without the light pollution of the cities, you can see the dark constellations, the empty spaces where there are no stars, which the ancient navigators used to find their way across this very water. Your pulse has completely synchronized with the environment. 15 seconds between waves. 15 seconds of silence. The humidity is a warm, wet blanket. You feel the salt on your skin, a tight, itchy sensation that reminds you of the miles you paddled today. It's a good kind of tired, a deep tissue exhaustion that settles into your marrow. The final echo as you drift toward sleep. The last sound you hear is the night watch of the reef. The tide is coming in now. The water is pushing deeper into the lava tubes under the island. Gurgle, thump, sigh. It is the sound of the island breathing. The sanctuary is complete. You are no longer an observer of this sonic history. You are a note within it. The balsa board, the camera, the radio, and your own heartbeat have all blended into a single, coherent frequency. Earth's horizon isn't a place you reach, it's a state of being. And tomorrow, when the first violet light touches the lagoon, you will wake up and do it all again. The map and the ghost. You unfold a maritime chart from 1948. The paper is heavy, textured with the grit of sand that has been trapped in its folds for decades. It feels like a living thing in your hands. As the wind catches the edges, the map flutters with a low frequency thrum thrum thrum, sounding like the wings of a large bird trying to take flight. Your finger traces the contour lines. You see the notations made in graphite. Heavy swell from the NW. Reef exposed at low tide. Possible break here. These men were the wave seekers in the purest sense. They didn't have satellite imagery or GPS coordinates. They had the smell of the air, the behavior of the birds, and the whispers of the local fishermen. They were listening to the planet. To find these spots, you had to develop an ear for the long travel, the specific sound of a swell that had crossed 3,000 miles of open ocean. It sounds different than a local wind chop. It is deeper, more resonant, carrying the weight of its journey. The midday stasis. As the noon sun reaches its zenith, the world enters a state of high-definition stillness. The wind drops to a dead calm. The only sound is the occasional thump of a coconut hitting the sand, and the distant, hypnotic crush of the reef. You sit on a driftwood log, the wood smooth as bone from years of salt scrubbing. You are surrounded by the tools of the Odyssey, the heavy balsa board leaning against a tree, the ticking camera, the rustling maps. In this silence, you realize that the sonic history of surfing isn't just about the music that came later, the guitars and the drums. It began here, in the gap between the waves. It began in the patience of the seeker. It is the sound of waiting. The heat shimmer on the horizon makes the islands in the distance appear to float above the water. You close your eyes. The texture of the air against your eyelids is like a warm, wet cloth. You are not waiting for a wave anymore. You are becoming part of the frequency of the island itself. Part II, the electric surge, finding stillness in the atomic garage, the transition from wood to wire. The silence of the outer reef doesn't disappear, it evolves. Imagine the transition. You are no longer standing on a bed of crushed coral in the South Pacific. The ground beneath your feet has shifted. It is now oil-stained concrete, cool and gritty, smelling of turpentine. old tires, and the sweet, cloying scent of surfboard resin. The year is 1962. You are in a garage in Southern California, a small, sun-baked box of stucco and wood just 3 miles inland from the Huntington Beach Pier. The heat here is different. It's a dry, suburban heat that vibrates with the distant drone of a lawnmower and the rhythmic shuck-shuck of a neighbor's sprinkler. But inside this garage, something new is breathing. It is a mechanical breath. It is the sound of electricity waiting to be shaped. The incandescence of the tube. In the corner of the garage sits a tan-end brown box, a Fender Showman amplifier. It looks like a piece of high-end luggage, but it is a cathedral of sound. Reach out and flip the heavy metal standby switch. Clack. There's a moment of expectant silence. Then the hum begins. It's a low-frequency 60-cycle throb, a warm, honeyed vibration that feels like a cat purring in a dark room. Look through the back of the cabinet. The vacuum tubes, the glass lungs of the machine begin to glow. They don't just light up, they simmer. A soft, ghostly orange light emanates from the filaments, heating the air inside the box until you can smell the ozone and the scorched dust on the glass. This is the atomic part of the garage. In an era of Cold War anxiety, these young men were taking the very technology of the age and turning it into a liquid, oceanic escape. The alchemy of the reverb tank. Beside the amplifier sits a separate metal unit, the reverb tank. This is the secret heart of the wet sound. Imagine the interior of this box. 2 long, slender steel springs are suspended in a vacuum of air. When a note is played, it travels through these springs, vibrating them, creating a physical echo that mimics the acoustics of a sea cave. Listen to the drip. You pluck a single string on a Fender Stratocaster. The sound doesn't just stop. It bounces. It swirls. It carries a metallic, liquid tail that sounds like a pebble dropped into a deep, dark well. Plink, bloop, hiss. If the 1950s was about the silence of the wave, the 1960s is about the physics of the wave translated into voltage. Every time the guitarist kicks the reverb tank, it creates a thunderous, crashing clank, the sound of a surfboard hitting the water after a late drop. It is a violent, beautiful disruption of the suburban quiet, the woody and the Saltair highway. The garage door rolls up with a heavy, metallic rattle. The California sun hits you like a physical weight, blinding and white. Parked in the driveway is a 1951 Ford Country Squire, a Woody. The side panels are real maple and birch, weathered by the salt air, until the varnish is cracked into 1,000 tiny islands. You slide onto the vinyl bench seat. It's hot, sticking to the back of your legs, smelling of suntan oil and old upholstery. You turn the ignition. The flathead V8 engine doesn't roar. It rumbles, a deep, rhythmic chugging that vibrates through the floorboards. As you pull onto the Pacific Coast Highway, the soundscape changes. The suburban urban drones are replaced by the windrush. The windows are down. The air smells of gasoline and the sudden, sharp arrival of the kelp beds. To your right, the Pacific is a vast, shimmering sheet of turquoise, but it sounds different through the roar of the engine. It sounds like a challenge. The glissando, the sound of the drop. You arrive at the pier. The crowd is a sea of colorful trunks and bleached hair, but you are focused on the sound. On a small stage at the edge of the sand, a band is playing. This isn't the polished surf music of the radio. This is the raw, staccato power of the king, Dick Dale. Listen to his left hand. He performs a glissando, a rapid slide down the thickest string of the guitar. It sounds like a dive bomber. It sounds like a 10-foot wall of water collapsing on a reef. Viararum. The sound is so loud it bypasses your ears and hits your chest. It is a sonic representation of gravity. When you are on a wave, there is a moment when you lose your stomach, the free fall. This guitar note is that feeling. It is a heavy, sliding descent into the unknown. The Atomic Garage has successfully captured the violence of the North Shore and bottled it into a 3-minute song. The sensory overload. The afternoon sun begins to dip. The golden hour of California turns the spray from the breaking waves into fine, airborne mist that catches the light like powdered gold. The beach is a sensory battlefield. The smell of charcoal grills, the slap of bare feet on wet sand, the high-pitched laughter of the crowd. But within this chaos, there is still a center of stillness. You sit on the sand, leaning against your board. The music from the stage blends with the roar of the ocean. They are no longer two separate things. The electric guitar has become an extension of the water. The reverb is the spray. The staccato picking is the heartbeat of the paddler. The eternal fade, the stillness within the surge. As the performance ends, the sun touches the horizon. The amplifiers are clicked into standby. The heat from the tubes begins to dissipate, making a series of tiny metallic ticking sounds as the glass cools. Tick, tick, ting. The beach begins to empty. The electric surge of the day is retreating, leaving behind a profound, ringing silence. You walk back to the woody, your skin tight and crusted with salt, your ears still vibrating with the frequency of the reverb. You realize that the glass horizon wasn't left behind in the islands. You brought it with you. You found it in the hum of the amp. You found it in the middle of the crowded pier. You found it in the 12,000 words of this journey. The sonic history of surfing isn't about the past. It's about the eternal present. It's the sound of the swell, whether it's hitting a reef in 1955 or a guitar string in 1962 or your headphones right now. Close your eyes. Listen to the fade. The hum is still there. The ocean is still there. And you are exactly where you need to be.